There are a lot of letters in the MG X-Power SV's name, and almost all of them were invented by MG's new management to convince the buying public they were definitely, truly serious about making highly tuned sports cars. The SV was, on the face of it, an astute business decision to release an exclusive MG sports car and get cash flowing into MG Rover's bank account. But now it's an almost forgotten footnote in Anglo-Italian engineering. So just where did this car come from, and why did it disappear almost as quickly? This is the MG X-Power SV story. The story starts with another raw British sports car, the TVR Griffith. Maserati technical director Giordano Casarini had been admiring the sales success of the low-volume car and proposed making an Italian TVR to Alejandro De Tomaso, maker of sports cars such as the Pantera. De Tomaso thought it an excellent idea and planning work began. The Griffith used Rover's aluminium V8, a regular feature of cars on this channel, and originally created by General Motors in the 1960s. The new De Tomaso car, soon to be called the ETX, would also use a large V8, and thoughts turned to Ford's new modular V8 that would be fitted to the Mustang. This had been designed as a next-generation engine capable of going 100,000 miles without major servicing while having better fuel economy and performance. It would be used on many vehicles from the Ford Econoline van to the Koenigsegg CCR. Casarini approached Ford to use this engine, but Ford didn't have any spare capacity. Discussions for an engine started with Australian Holden Special Vehicles, but Ford came back to Casarini saying capacity had freed up and he could get his engines, transmissions and electrical systems. It had the advantage that it would be easier to homologate for the lucrative North American market, so Ford's modular V8 was an easy choice. Styling would be done by Marcello Gandini, who'd done such diverse cars as the Lamborghini Countach, Citroën BX and the original Volkswagen Polo. The team working on the new De Tomaso ETX had fallen in love with the TVR Griffith's convenient folding roof mechanism, and they wanted Gandini to replicate something similar. He produced an elegant solution. The top could be removed and stowed in the boot as with the Griffith, but the rear would electronically roll back. By 1996, De Tomaso had a prototype that they showed at the Geneva Motor Show as the Bigua. This reveal was also something of an investment pitch. De Tomaso didn't have the necessary capital to put the car into production. Enter Shell Cavalli, an entrepreneur who'd made his name importing British cars into North America and had tried his hand at manufacturing with Jensen Motors that hadn't ended well. Hoping to expel that demon, Cavalli agreed to provide £23 million to bring the car to market as the newly renamed De Tomaso Mangusta. Shell put his son Bruce in charge of design and thoroughly modernised De Tomaso's factory. The chassis would be designed by ex-Formula One designer Enrique Scalabroni, who'd created a chassis with a high level of structural rigidity. The car was designed to be an open top, but it was much stiffer than many other open tops of the period. It also had an excellent frontal impact structure for the time. The body was made up of lightweight plastic panels to offset the extra weight of the chassis. To save costs, Cavalli raided the Ford Mustang parts bin. The door handles, steering wheel and half the switchgear were used. The designers also seemed to be in two minds about whether the car should have 2 or 4 seats. It technically had 4 seats, but it could only fit a couple of double-jointed magician's assistants. But the designers lent heavily on the skills of Italian craftsmen. The car used leather throughout with a high degree of craftsmanship. The first car left the factory at the end of 1999, and by January the De Tomaso Mangusta was announced for sale in North America for £60,000. It would also go racing in the Trans Am series to help drum up sales. Reviewers praised the handling and performance, but felt the looks from such a renowned stylist as Gandini were a little bit awkward. Internal squabbles between De Tomaso and Cavalli led the car to be renamed the Cavalli Mangusta shortly after it was launched. Sales were a disappointment, and by the end of the year the company had lopped £7,000 off the asking price. But if you could afford £60,000 to buy a car, price wasn't the deciding factor. So by 2001, after selling just 284 cars, Bruce Cavalli was looking for an exit strategy. Just 1 year earlier, BMW had been looking for an exit strategy to its financially disastrous relationship with UK car company Rover. This had led to BMW cutting Rover free in 2000, along with a £500 million bank balance boost to keep the company ticking over. This meant the newly renamed MG Rover company was temporarily cash rich and looking around for projects to give them a competitive lineup for as little outlay as possible. Eyes quickly fell on the struggling Cavalli project, and after some negotiations, MG Rover agreed to buy the assets for just £7 million. It was a fitting end to Shell Cavalli's project, as he got his start 50 years earlier importing MGs into North America. On the face of it, MG got a great deal. This was a fully developed car with good handling, acceptable build quality, and most importantly, the ability to be sold in North America, where MGs were still fondly remembered. In the rest of Europe, it would be a great halo car to help sell the rest of MG's range. The main problem with the Mangusta seemed to be the questionable styling, so MG Rover's design director Peter Stevens was asked to come up with a restyle. The changes couldn't be too drastic. If the crash structure was altered, then the car would lose its North American homologation. The new shape would give the Italian car a very British Rover 25, 45 and 75 look. The design, called the MG X80, was shown at the 2001 Frankfurt Motor Show just 3 months after the Cavalli purchase. Peter Stevens had experience designing cool sports cars, being responsible for the 1980s Lotus Esprit restyle and the McLaren F1. He wasn't happy with his initial design, and the press seemed to agree, so work began on a new, more aggressive design inspired from watching The Fast and the Furious, and got some help from design firm Aria. Giordano Casarini, the person who'd initiated the project when it was known as the De Tomaso ETX, was still involved and would help out with the new vehicle. The initial plan was to produce 10,000 cars a year with a new aluminium body, but MG Rover felt that this was too difficult to accomplish, especially with the lukewarm reaction from the press at Frankfurt. The car would be manufactured at the same Italian factory Cavalli's Mangusta had been built, but this facility simply wasn't set up for this kind of volume, so increasing it would require investment and experience MG Rover simply didn't have. Production volumes were scaled back. The car would be a lightweight sports car with a lightweight carbon fibre body and a cool £100,000 asking price, a massive £40,000 more than the Mangusta. That's quite a ballsy move. Cavalli had failed to sell the car in its largest potential market, the USA, and this was a market Cavalli had been selling to for years, but MG Rover was hoping the new styling and MG's name would win them over. The team had to move quickly to turn the car into something they could make money from. Amazingly, the body went from a clay mock-up to a final production car in just 10 months. The car would be launched as the MG X-Power SV with promised 200 mph top speed and a 0 to 60 time of 4.2 seconds. The marketing men even suggested tuning packages could get the power output up to 965 horsepower through nitrous oxide, although this was pure hyperbole. X-Power was MG's new sporting sub-brand, and this would join the XT X-Power 385 and TF X-Power 500 concepts released a year earlier. Like Cavalli, MG set plans in motion to take the SV racing and would spend money it didn't have, entering Lola manufactured MGs into the Le Mans LMP2 series with the goal of shifting warmed over Rover 25s from dealers' forecourts. On the plus side, the list price was down to a more reasonable £65,000, but it was still considered a little steep for something with an MG badge on the back. But it was hard to make the price lower. The car had to visit 6 different companies on its convoluted course to completion. The carbon fibre body panels were made in the UK, shipped to the De Tomaso Cavalli factory where the chassis was built, and then the whole car was shipped back to Longbridge for finishing. And many parts were sourced from other suppliers such as the Fiat Punto headlights. MG Rover ran into problems making those carbon fibre body panels, which delayed the whole project. The 27 people who'd ordered the car at the launch would have to wait 12 months until they got their hands on one. When it did arrive, the acceleration was a more pedestrian 5.3 seconds to 60, exactly the same as the Mangusta, with the top speed only 5 miles an hour faster. Even with those carbon fibre body panels and without those impossible rear seats, the SV was 20 kilograms heavier. 2004 bought a faster SVR model, giving the car 385 horsepower from a slightly larger 5-litre engine, with an automatic option for the first time. Again, marketing men promised more sporty versions, such as one using the 765 horsepower engine that had recently been used in the MG ZTT to become the world's fastest non-production estate car. Reviews from the press were generally good, but in the early 2000s there was plenty of choice if you had upwards of £65,000 to spend on a sports car. And MG's build quality was good, but not fantastic. The more expensive SVR was in Porsche 911 and Aston DB9 territory. Sales were slow, and by the time MG Rover called in the receivers in 2005, just 82 cars had been produced, and that included pre-production and show cars. Some of these did find owners after bankruptcy, and there was an attempt to resurrect the car in 2008 with William Riley, who may or may not have been related to the Riley motor family, depending upon who you talk to. He bought the remaining parts and cars and relaunched the car with either 420 or 520 horsepower output, with a reputed 3.6 second 0 to 60 time and 200 mile an hour top speed. The car would be known as the MG X-Power WR, which was news to Nanjing Automobile Group in China, who'd paid good money to buy the MG name, and they promptly turned around and sued Riley. But William Riley had big plans. There was a 700 horsepower 5.4 litre V8 version in the works, and with all the excitement around Tesla's Roadster, Riley wanted to create an EV version with lithium polymer batteries and Kevlar bodywork that incorporated solar cells that would charge the car. But his ambitions were larger than his bank balance, and it all came crumbling down after selling only 7 cars. Debts were mounting up, as could be seen with a potential supplier in Toronto who'd taken a car in payment for the 9 months of work he'd done to attract business in Canada. He'd sent it back to the UK because, well, the interior was unfinished, but soon saw his car up on an online auction site. It was subsequently sold and then crashed. The X-Power name made an unexpected return in 2019 when MG's Chinese owners announced a 350 horsepower 2-litre turbocharged version of its MG6 4-door saloon as the MG6 X-Power concept. But with an estimated list price of £90,000 and the MG6 only being sold in China, the chances of you passing one on the road are pretty slim. There was method to MG Rover's madness in producing the X-Power SV. TVR had shown there was a market for relatively cheap rear-engine muscle cars, and they thought that they could get a piece of this pie. They needed to make a splash quickly and get their finances in order, but they quickly found the Mangusta wasn't a car that they could sell in any volume, and it soon became just a distraction from fixing the main part of their business. They had hopes to sell it in the North American market, cashing in on the MG name, but they had no dealer network to tap into. The X-Power SV wasn't a bad car, but it was being launched into a crowded market and wasn't anything special. Who would buy this expensive car from a company that produced small hatchbacks and was on shaky financial ground? The X-Power SV was like an ornate angel sitting on top of a worn-out Christmas tree with lights that were on the blink. It was a cool car, but it wasn't going to make MG much money when their main business was hemorrhaging money and cash wasn't available to turn it into a viable business. Just 1 year earlier, BMW had been looking for an exit strategy to its financially disastrous relationship with UX. This had led to BMW cutting Rover free in 2000, along with a £500 million bank balance boost. That is hard to say. Why do I always write tongue twisters? Along with a... Shouldn't be laughing while I'm saying things. If the crash structure was altered, then the car would lose its North American obligation. So work began on a new, more aggressive design inspired from watching The Fast and the Furious, and got some help from design firm Aria. 2004 bought a faster SVR model, giving the car